Okay, so how do you get to know a potential? Next, an important thing to consider, and probably is a deal breaker for many, many women in particular. Number 8, living with family. I could probably do a whole series on living with in-laws separate and just the experience of it and the difficulties and challenges. Make it clear from the start if you expect your wife to live with your parents. This is a cultural thing. It's not rooted in Islam. I try not to give fatwas or anything like that, but this is a common knowledge, right? It's not a duty, but it is also not black and white. What do you do if you really like a guy, but he's got a single mother at home or an elderly father at home that there's really no other way of looking after? You know, I think the problem is we tend to make things too black and white. So it doesn't have to be like no in-laws and that's it. No, but if you do go into that, you need to be able to understand the difficulties that living with in-laws can bring and the sort of sacrifices you have to make. And these are the discussions you have to have with your potential spouse. And if as a guy you want to make this as a condition, fine. And girls, if you agree to it, fulfill it. It's as simple as that. And that's if you agree to it. But you really need to understand what you're getting yourself into if you do. And unfortunately, what I see a lot is girls usually agree, and then afterwards there are problems. Because they just never fully realize what the difficulties will be. They're just blindly in love with the guy and they're just like, okay, you know what, I'll do it, whatever. And then it kicks in when they actually live and they move in and they start seeing the difficulties that might arise from it. Then I've seen a lot of marriages unfortunately break up as a result of that. Like if it is an in-law situation and you're living with family or extended families, will she be expected to serve the parents? Will she be expected to cook the food and clean the house every day? These are difficult things, and it's unfortunately not rooted in religion. It's not rooted in Islam. It's a very cultural thing, and it still happens and it's still expected. And again, I have to remind guys, you're not marrying a slave for your parents, okay? For parents who are healthy, fit and well, you're not doing that. And even if your mother or your father are old and elderly and frail, it's your duty as the son to do that. And by the way, for the girl, her parents, if they're old and frail and elderly, then it's her duty to look after them. But if people do things out of compassion and sympathy, which we forget so often, it just becomes about rights, and people forget what sympathy is anymore. Like, it's okay to sometimes serve each other's parents. Like, it's okay for the guy to do that for her parents and for her to do it for his parents. It's obviously different in a scenario where the girl's living with the guy's parents because it's all the time. But what I mean is the idea of sympathy and heart should still be there. You can't forget that as a Muslim anyway, that you gotta have that want to help other Muslims and other people in humanity anyway. Number 9, who are their friends? You are known by the company you keep. You really are. Who are the guy's friends? Stalk some of their timelines. What sort of things do they get up to? Stalk their social media. And I'm going to keep this simple and short. You cannot underestimate the importance and the effect of friends on someone's life. If they have friends who are immoral or into the wrong things that you consider immoral or incorrect, then you can bet your life that that guy or that girl is like her friends, because that's who she keeps around and that's who he keeps around, and that's who they are. But you may well like that sort of thing, so fine. But ask about the friends, ask about who they are, and get to know a little bit about them too, because it gives you an idea of the sort of guy that you're getting yourself into and the sort of girl you're getting yourself into. And then question number 10, gender interaction. Probably one of the biggest things that determines the outcomes and sort of problems in marriages is gender interaction. And it becomes a bit more complicated when you've got social media as a platform. What are you comfortable with each other interactions, and in real life and online and work and in professional circumstances? Is there some sort of belief of segregation? These are important considerations, because if you yourself don't have friends of the opposite gender, but your wife or your husband does, how is that going to affect you? If you know that your spouse is out and having a conversation, friendly conversation, or is going out on dinner dates or lunches with a lot of friends of the opposite gender, is that something that matters to you? It's a very personal thing. It's a very personal thing, and in a lot of cultures it's okay, and people do it quite regularly. They see it as harmless. But of course, Islamically, some people prefer very limited interaction. And it's important you know where that person is. And there might be one way of interacting before marriage and there might be another way after. But don't expect anything to change. I'm gonna just cut these questions for a second just to say this one thing. Don't expect anyone to change, right? So the questions they answer, expect that that is what you will live with in the hereafter. This is what you will live with after marriage. Are you going to be happy with that? If they say, oh, this is what I do now and I hope to change. Okay, you could give them some benefit of the doubt, but most likely expect them not to change for a while. Would you still be happy with who they are right now? That's what you need to find out. Okay, here is the next point, and I think it's very crucial, very crucial. Illnesses and conditions. What sort of diseases and problems and issues are there in the family itself? Are there any illnesses that are genetic? Are there any illnesses that the person suffers with that might really affect their life? These are some valid and pertinent points of discussion, and you cannot miss these out. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. There could be diseases which, for example, affect mobility. Why is that important? Well, it affects everything, right? In terms of day-to-day life, how this person moves, how they might need help on a day-to-day basis. These are considerations that you need to take into account because it might also, for example, affect physical intimacy. These are serious and difficult topics. Someone may suffer with mental health disorders, and someone without understanding may not be able to deal with that. There might be some genetic disorders which might, for example, present themselves in future generations or with children, and there might be a high likelihood that your children might have this sort of condition. And this is such a big challenge because it's not only a challenge for the person, for the spouse, but the person who suffers with it as well. Because, with someone who has these sort of problems, trying to get married is a challenge in itself. And I really pray it becomes easy for them, because we live in a time where people are very superficial, very mean, very just mean-spirited. But the last thing they want is someone to treat them like a charity case. The bottom line here is simple. Know what you are capable of understanding and coping with, given the facts presented to you. I mean, there's a fine line between good intentions and marrying someone thinking that you can do good things for them, though you can't and you're unable to. And then maybe regretting your choices. Everyone's different, yes, and everyone has different ways of dealing with things and knows what they're able to live with. We all live with people with illnesses in our family, and personally, and within our parents or siblings or whatever, and we all know what we're happy with. It really, in an ideal world, should be of limited importance, but it is unfortunately something which does surface in a relationship, and something which is there as a potential difficulty and clashes and understanding each other in the future. Just be comfortable with who you are and whether you are happy that the spouse is able to deal with your problem, or that the person that you are marrying, that you're able to deal with their problem. And I pray to Allah that Allah keeps everyone safe and healthy and allows us to develop our understanding of each other's diseases and conditions, particularly when it comes to things like mental health. And it's really important to be honest. It's really important to be honest about these things. Please do not hide these things from your spouses. If you had something that really you hid from your potential spouse, it can really affect the validity of your marriage. It can really affect the whole foundations and can rock it to the ground. Number 12, I've run out of fingers. The concept of money. What about things like interest, mortgage, loans? How do they spend? How do they save? Do they have any debts? For example, if you don't believe in interest or loans or mortgages in the conventional sense that other people think are okay, for example, people buying cars or houses. If you don't believe in that, then the implication is such that your whole life is going to be tainted with that money. And I'm not giving an opinion in terms of what is right or wrong. What I'm saying is marry someone who has the same understanding of money as you, because convincing people afterwards is going to be impossible, especially when it comes to wealth, because we tend to be very money driven. So if you are doing one thing one way, then it's very difficult to retract from it, especially when livelihood or living comes into the picture. Number 13, good and bad qualities. Ask about what they think are their good qualities, what are their bad qualities, and then you can try and weigh it out. See how they answer that question. This is a very typical question that you get in interviews, and I can never answer them really well, because in one way you're sort of killing yourself, and another way you're sort of praising yourself, and you just want to, how are you supposed to answer that question? My good quality is that I'm a stud. It's interesting to see your potential's own perception of themselves. Number 14, expressions. Expressions. And I don't mean whether they're able to express No, it'd be interesting to see how they express love and how they express anger. I know some people prefer constant reassurance. They always want someone to hug them, to touch them, to say nice things. And for some people, that's just not in their nature to do that. So if you're someone who's not able to express all the time, but you're more of a quiet person and you express love and affection in a different way, it's an important consideration, because for some guys and some women, they really need that constantly. And again, anger is one of the biggest issues here. Unfortunately, this applies more so with men. There's a big issue with anger, and it destroys a lot of marriages because they think anger is a reasonable substitute to shutting up the whole argument and for proving that they are right. And of course, anger is a form of emotional, a form of verbal abuse, and that can unfortunately sometimes transcend into physical, and it's difficult to really ask that question because you don't know for sure what their anger is like. This is where asking your friends and people that they know what their friend is like during anger, because they usually have witnessed it, as well as asking the potential themselves. How do they deal with anger? Anger for defending what is right and just is one thing, but then using anger as a tool against your spouse, that is another problem. That's something which unfortunately a lot of Asian Arab men suffer with. Number 15, the typical day. A nice overview of your potential spouse is to see how they live their day routinely. Ask them what they do in a typical day, or a typical week even. What do they get up to in the daytime, in the night, and when they go out, and what do they do with their friends, and who they're talking to, what they're doing. Are there certain elements of their day that really impresses you? Are there certain elements of the day that make you think, wow, what are they doing with their lives? This will give you a nice overall impression. So there you go. That is my relatively succinct, I guess, list of questions that you should definitely ask. It is not a comprehensive list. There are so many more things that you can ask and answer, and you will see that sometimes the conversation just flows naturally. You will cover a lot of points outside of these 15, but that they will filter into different topics and subjects. And you will find there are some things that you get along with very well, and there's some things that you disagree with, but that's okay. Remember, the most important thing is not that every answer is the same as yours. The important thing is whether you are able to live with that in your life, and whether you're able to understand that side of things and that opinion. And do not lie for that reason, please, because you'll be the one who suffers. If you're lying to please the other person just because you want to marry them, you're going to collapse. You're eventually going to fall. You're going to fall really hard. There's only so long you'll be able to put up with that act once you get married, and then everything will go downwards in a spiral. And then you'll wonder, why did I ever even consider marrying this? What was I thinking? Often we're blinded by lust or desire and just wanting to get married that we fool ourselves into thinking that it's all going to be okay. Be honest. One final thing I want to emphasize here. This process, the length of it varies for different people. For me, I had decided with my wife after 7 years. I found my wife after 7 years of trying. And you know how long it took me to finally decide with her? 3 days. From the first time I met her to the time we got engaged was 3 days. 3 days. But at the same time, I've been very close to marrying other women, and before things unfortunately broke down, and sometimes that process took months. So you really don't know. The point I cannot emphasize enough is do things the right way. There is something as talking too much, because I think that if you talk so much that you know everything you possibly want to know that are irrelevant. For example, you don't really need to know what they had for dinner, or what they had for breakfast. Those are irrelevant things, and it can lead on to other things. Just do things the right way. Ask what you need to ask, what are important, the questions I've given, for example, and anything else you might want to add. Keep the conversation on track, or otherwise things can get off track and you can say things which are probably inappropriate, and that's easy to do. The more halal or the more decent we keep our interactions with the right intentions, the more blessings that will rain upon us. I'm telling you for a fact, once you've gone through all this so many times, how do you know you found the right one? How do you know that? How do you know after that you have seen 1,000 potentials, 1,000 possible spouses? How do you know that you found the right one? That just one of them is for you? Well, you just know. Honestly, you just know. You will not have an ounce of hesitancy in your heart. When you're marrying this person, you think, you know what, I'm at peace, I'm at ease. There's no moment in the process where you're thinking, oh my god, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing because of this or that. Some of this will be cold feet, but the reasons for that will be sort of generic, like, what's going to happen tomorrow, I'm really scared. It's just okay. It's normal to feel that sort of nervousness. What I'm talking about is, in your heart what's the truth. You know what you feel. So be honest with yourself, because if you're not, you're going to be standing there on the day of your wedding and thinking, oh my god, I did the wrong thing here. And you don't want to be there. You do not want to be in that position. Do istikhara as much as possible. Special dua, the special prayer that you ask Allah to guide you and put the best in whatever decision you make. Don't expect crazy dreams and things to fall. No, it just means that you feel happy and content in the decision you're making, and the outcome will be whatever Allah wills. Once you're at the end of this process, you propose. Well, the guy proposes usually, and the girl then says, they're usually waiting and want the sort of affirmation from the guy's side. It's just the cultural way things happen in most cultures. And if both sides say yes, congratulations, you are officially engaged. Now keep contact to a minimum, okay? Because you've done all you needed to do, you're happy, you're engaged, and you want to make it work. Save something for after marriage, guys. Honestly, it's a beautiful phase, savor it. If you get too used to each other, you're just not going to be as excited after marriage, and you've got nothing left to find out. The first year of marriage at least is meant to be golden. You're meant to have that honeymoon phase, the honeymoon period. Keep that. You're going to have this temptation and this want to keep talking to each other. Try and avoid that. Try and make it a thing that, we're going to keep our communication to a minimum. But I want to talk about this more in the next video. So next up, preparing for the wedding day and the sort of stresses and the stuff that comes up, including the dreaded topic of meher. Dil wale dulhaniya le jayenge, huh? Yeah. Until next time.